Hi everybody, it is 2 a.m. right now. I think the fireworks have finally stopped, but if they do happen again, I guess it's fitting because this is our final finance lesson. Okay, we made it to the end of the road. There will be just one more thing I'm going to drop on Tuesday. It's not a lesson, it's just something else, but you'll see. But yeah, this is our last final. This is our final lesson. Okay, and we're going to talk about credit cards. So, I already talked about them briefly in the last lesson, but I'm just going to go into a little more detail before we approach the reading. Keep in mind that this lesson is set up exactly like the previous two. So, step 1, watch this video. In step 2, there will be a second video where I'm going to show you how to look up credit card information on a banking website. And then in step 3, you'll do the reading on credit cards because you'll have the foundation for it to make sense. Okay, so let's just jump right into it because I'm sure you guys are very tired too. So I kind of consider credit cards like a weapon, right? It's like, what does a weapon do? It kind of has two things, right? A weapon can be used to protect you and help you, and a weapon can also harm you. And that's kind of what a credit card is. It's like a credit card can be very useful for giving you money when you don't have any cash. But at the same time, and it could also help build your credit score. But at the same time, if you use the card irresponsibly, you could end up in my situation where you're just drowning in debt and, it's very hard to get out of it, and I'll show you what I mean in a few minutes. But just to review what we talked about, okay? Remember, when it comes to debt, there's two types. There is revolving debt, and then there is installment debt. Again, what makes installment debt installment? It's a loan that gets paid down each month until it's paid off. Right? So again, car loans, student loans, and mortgages. Sorry, I forgot my T there. In other words, home loans would be an example of it. Again, I take out a $20,000 loan from a bank to buy this car. Each month I make payments, and the amount keeps going down and down each month, right? Like, I'm not going to take out another loan to put more for the car. I mean, that doesn't make sense. So I take a $20,000 loan, and I pay off that $20,000. Now, keep in mind the bank charges you interest, so the bank is going to make money, but again, the point is I can't add to it, right? One thing I just want to mention to you guys about student loans. Sometimes a student will tell me that they got into a college, but the reason they're going to say no to the college is because they'll have to take out student loans. And this is my advice to you guys on that. Taking out loans is not a bad thing because, honestly, it will start helping you build credit immediately. Now, you don't want to do what I did, where I had to take out $100,000 worth of student loans because that just meant I'm going to be drowning later. But I remember I had this one former student at my old school who she got accepted to Syracuse University, and Syracuse told her that over 4 years she would just have to pay $3,000. That's it. And she ended up declining the offer because she didn't want to pay anything. Now, guys, keep in mind when you graduate from college, you're going to get a high-paying job, meaning if all you owe is $3,000, even if it's 10% interest, which it wouldn't be, even at 10% interest, you could pay that money off very quickly if you're making $70,000 a year, right? So, the point is with student loans, it's okay to take out some loans, meaning $3,000, $5,000, $10,000. You can easily pay that off. You'll establish a credit history. What you don't want to take out is $100,000, $120,000, because then, trust me, I can tell you a lot of stories. Your life is going to be extremely difficult, right? So, to make the final point on student loans, I had a friend whose her father was a successful businessman, and she went to NYU, and her father paid for all of her college. So she was very lucky in that regards. But for years, even at age 25, 27, 28, whenever she applied for a credit card at a bank, they always denied her. Now, you're probably like, Mr. Mullins, wait, that doesn't make sense. She doesn't have any debt. Wouldn't they see her as like a good person to give a credit card to? Well, remember what I said. It's about credit history. Guess what? Because her parents paid for her college entirely, and she never had a credit card before, she had no credit history. So banks wouldn't give her a credit card because she had no history of paying things back. And that's why I'm saying, like, the whole system is kind of like, messed up. She finally was able to get her first credit card at 32, and even then it was the type of card where they give it to people who are just starting, so to speak. So like I said, she was very lucky her parents paid for all of NYU, but because she had no history of paying anything back, the banks didn't care. They saw her as too risky. So that's what I want to say about student loans is don't panic if you have to pay a little. Just apply to your colleges. You'll get the financial aid package. If a college is saying you'll owe $5,000, $10,000 over, after 4 years, it's no big deal. You'll pay that off quickly because you'll get a higher paying job. Just don't end up owing $60,000, $70,000, $100,000, etc. All right, so that's what I want to say about student loans. Okay, now revolving debt. Revolving debt, again, what makes it revolving? It's like a revolving door, right? You could just keep going around and around and around, because the idea is you can make payments but still spend on it. That's exactly what credit cards are, right? I can make a payment and then just keep using my card. So in other words, every time I pay it down, I could make it go back up again. Whereas again, with installment debt, you can't do that. So I'm going to give you a few terms so that we know the neighborhood of credit cards, and then I'm going to give you an example of how it works to close out this video. So when you apply for a credit card, they're going to ask you for certain information. They'll ask you where you live, your address, most likely your social security number. They'll ask you, do you have a job, what that job is, the telephone number for that job, and they'll also ask what your salary is, because depending on what your salary is will affect how much of what they call a credit limit they will give you. So think of a credit limit is, what's the best way to define this, is the maximum you can spend on a credit card. Meaning, they're going to give you an amount and you can't go above that. So let's say I take out a credit card from Chase, right? And let's say they make my credit limit $1,000. And the only reason I say 1,000 because let's say I've never had a credit card before. So the bank isn't going to give you a big credit limit because they see you as risky, right? So what they usually do is they start you off with a low number, and then as time goes on and you make payments and things seem great, they might raise that number over time. So let's say I get my credit card and my credit limit is 1,000. That means that I cannot spend over 1,000. If I do spend over 1,000, That will be very bad, and it will hurt my credit history. Most credit cards now, though, they kind of like if you spent $9,999 and then you try to buy that $2 bottle of water, most credit cards it will stop it from working, so you can't go over the limit. But the point is, never go over the limit, because that will hurt your credit score. Now, in addition to giving me this $1,000 credit limit, it will have what's called an APR. Okay, and all this means is annual percentage rate. In other words, this is the interest rate. Basically, you know what a credit card is? A credit card is basically a high-interest loan. That's what it is. Credit card interest rates are usually very high. What they will give me is what's called an introductory period. So what this means, remember, they're trying to convince me to get the card. So the way they're going to do that is through advertising, right? And the way they're going to convince me is saying, we will give you a 0% APR for 15 months. Meaning, when I open the account and they give me that $1,000 on the card, they're saying whenever I use it, they are not going to charge me any interest at all for the first 15 months. Meaning if I spend $50 on it, right, and then I only pay $25 the next month and there's still $25 left, there will be no interest charged to it. Once the introductory rate expires, then it will switch over to the APR, which will maybe be 16%, 11%. If you have a good credit score, that rate will probably be lower, but if you have no credit score, it will raise it. But this is what I mean, guys. It means after that 15 months, some cards they'll offer 18 months, some 12. If you're opening your first card, they will probably only offer you 6 months, 0%. But this is what I mean by it's a high interest loan, meaning after this 15 months is over, whenever I spend on this card, between each billing date, they are going to charge me 16% interest daily, compounding, by the way, and I'll show you how that works in a few minutes. And that's why it's a high interest loan, meaning every time you use that card, it's gonna compound daily unless you pay it off in full the next month. Now, what will happen is, so let's say I spend a little money on my card. Let's say I spend let's say I spent $100, and I'll tell you later why I'm making it $100 on the card for this month, for the month of July or June. I'm sorry. So during June, I only spent $100 on the card, which means I have $900 left to spend, but I didn't spend it. So what I will do is I will get a bill, and on the bill it will say the minimum payment. Remember, the bank doesn't really want you paying the card off in full because what happens? They don't make any money from the interest. So when you get your bill, it won't say minimum payment $100. What it will probably say is minimum payment $25. So what the bank is saying is, or the credit agency, what they're saying is, when I make this payment, in order to prevent the interest rate from going higher or lowering my credit score, I have to pay at least $25. Now, you might look at that and say, well, that's great. Well, not really, because if you think about it, remember, I owe $100 on it. So if I only pay $25, that means I have $75 left to pay, and that $75, that's 16%, is now compounding on that money every day. I'll show you how that works. So yeah, you don't want to pay the minimum. Alright? Don't pay below the minimum, because if you pay below the minimum, you're breaking the contract, and they will raise this interest rate. Your credit score will also drop. If you don't make a payment, it's the same thing. They will raise this interest rate to maybe 20%, and your credit score is going to drop. So yeah, the minimum payments, if you don't have money, at least make the minimum payment. But if you have the extra money, always try to pay above the minimum payment. And since I only spent $100, the goal would be to pay $100. Now, why did I choose 100? Well, because I was trying to make my life easy math-wise. Because basically, this is kind of like the unspoken rule. If you want to know how to play the game, is a lot of people say, don't spend more than 10% on your card each month. Now, why did I go with 100? Because if we go 1,000 times 0.10, which is 10%, that equals $100. So in other words, if I'm staying within the 10% limit, if I have a $1,000 card, that means every month I'm only spending the maximum of $100. Because the point is, the closer I get to 1,000, like let's say I spend 500 and then another 100, and it's now $600. The closer it gets to the credit limit, it's actually going to lower my credit score. So if you stay within the 10%, I would say the people who know how to use credit cards like very skillfully, they never spend above 10%, and they always pay the amount off in full. Why? Because if you pay it in full, guess what? You don't get charged interest. You only get charged interest if you don't pay off in full each month. All right? And now I'll show you why that is so deadly and why I am having so much trouble getting out of debt. So, like I said, the one thing I hate teaching this unit is that it really makes me look into my finances and realize how many mistakes that I made. So, look, I'll put it out there. Right now, I have a Chase credit card that has $31,987 and 10 cents on it. Meaning, I think my credit limit is 32,000. Might be a little higher, but notice how close that is to the credit limit. Now, interest rate wise, I believe my APR is 14%. So that means every month this is not paid off, $31,987.10 is getting charged 14% interest every single day, compounding. So what does that mean? So last month I made a payment, and this is what it brought the number down to. Okay? Now, I obviously can't pay this whole thing off, so it's going to gain interest. So at 14%, what's going to happen is when the end of the month comes and they charge the interest, that interest is going to be $391.19. So we got to add that now. So what's going to happen is, in order to pay off my card, I'm going to have to pay $32,378.29. Because again, this is what I owed. Now they tacked on the interest for the month. So see how it goes up? So in order for me to pay, in order for me not to pay interest the next time, I got to pay this full amount. And like I said, it's not going to happen. Now, what is my minimum? So my minimum on each bill is about $700, meaning the bank is saying I need to pay at least $700 to prevent any bad fees. So notice how I'm trapped, right? I got to at least make $700 or more. Now, this is what makes it revolving debt. So I actually pay, let me just write this down again. So remember, it went up to $32,378.29. So whenever I make a payment, I pay $800. I try to pay a little extra. So when I make that payment of $800, now it will drop what's called the principal. In other words, the amount the amount owed, it's going to drop it to $31,578.25. So going back to my question, what makes this revolving debt? Notice what has happened here. Because of that interest added, I made a $800 payment. But in reality, what did the principal go down? Because now I got to do 800 minus 391.19, meaning every time I pay $800, only $408 goes off of the principal. Meaning the bank gets about $400 of it to keep that they made off me, and it only goes down, the principal only goes down by $400. Because remember, my original amount was $31,987, now it's $31,578. So you could already see why it's so hard to dig out. And then here's the problem. I got to go to the market on Friday night to get groceries. It's been about $200 each time. So guess what? I made this $800 payment. I'm probably going to spend $200 in groceries on that card. So now it's going to be $31,778.29. Notice how very little I'm able to pay it down. And that's why credit card debt, when you fall into it like this, is so deadly. It is so hard to dig out of it. And that's why I'm saying, guys, if you want to be smart, follow this rule. Don't spend above 10%, because if you're spending 10%, chances are you will be able to pull it off and pay the full amount every month and avoid interest. Now, before I close out this video, I want to say something about going back to what I was talking about, Muslim banking. So Muslims who follow the religious banking rules, they can still get credit cards, and there's a way to do it. So one of my colleagues, she's Muslim, and she has a credit card. Now you're thinking like she practices the Muslim banking rules, and she shouldn't, there should be no interest, right? But the credit card has interest. So how does she avoid breaking the rule of paying interest? Well, she just pays her card off in full every month. So, you know, if you follow the Muslim banking rules, the way to avoid paying interest with the credit card is just always make sure you've saved up the money first, spend on the card, because you'll build credit, and then just pay the amount off in full, so you're never paying interest and you're not doing anything haram. You're not sinning if you follow the religious banking rules. Okay, so I will see. This will close out this video, and I will see you in a few minutes to just show you how to, what you should look for in a credit card. Okay, I'll be back, guys.